Hi, everybody, and welcome to Stargate the Cosmos. And I'm your host, Janet Carol Lessin, and my co-host is Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as Mad Painter. And you're listening to Revolution Radio, Studio B. And our guest today is Bret Colin Sheppard. And Bret says about his early life, to build up trauma in my life and coping with the impossible was a special kind of training or programming that allowed me to see things others couldn't. My OBEs, which stands for out-of-body experiences, became stronger, and communication with E.T.s was commonplace in my life. I was about 8 years old when I met Eno. She taught me about human perception and how to refine my drawings. I could draw someone just by looking at them once because I have a photographic memory in a sense. It's not complete, but very precise. I remember images I have seen before just as they are. I drew pictures all through school, and in my second year of high school, something very strange happened that would have a profound impact on my life. And we're going to hear about that in today's show. Dr. Sasha Lessin, hi, welcome.
Thank you. Looking forward to the show today.
Okay, so we'll bring on Bret Colin Sheppard, and you're going to explain to us what very strange thing happened that would have a profound impact on your life. Welcome, Bret.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, very well. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and a cool introduction there. Nice.
Well, that's you sent me, and it was great. I love it. It's like little drama that's built up for our listeners and for us too. We don't know what happened.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin on that stuff. It was just very bizarre. It was like these people were coming into my life and teaching me things and telling me things, and now they're gone. They're completely gone off the face of the earth, you know. And it's not a timeline thing. They were here in reality, you know. It's a very strange thing. But
how do you know they're gone off the face of the earth?
Well, because I'm a very good researcher, and I know if they were still here somewhere, because they were pretty prominent in their fields. You know, like I know was a cartoonist for Playboy magazine, and now there's no sign or trace of it at all. You know, but I remember seeing her art. Yeah, that's her name. I know, and she has no last name. You know.
Oh.
So it's
okay. So she was an artist for Playboy.
Yeah, and as you guys know, we had a Mars conference, and there was a guy there, and he validated that a lot of the Playboy ladies that were in the magazines, and some of the men that even worked for them were not from Earth. You know. And so he was intrigued by my story, and he validated it. He said that's correct, you know. That's exactly right. They just leave, you know.
What were they doing working for Playboy of all things?
Well, that's a very interesting thing. They the way they like to communicate with Earthlings is, believe it or not, having sexual relations with them. So that they can right. Actually download a lot faster when someone is in that state of mind. You know, when someone's in that in that state of euphoria. So they can literally blast them with information in that state, and it's kind of like that. You know, William Tompkins talked a little bit about that. Yeah.
Right, Bill Tompkins is very sexy. Do you have any recall of having any kind of sex with the extraterrestrials?
No, I was very young. It wasn't with extraterrestrials. It was with horrible people, you know.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. What was fascinating about that is they didn't really want me to go through that, the extraterrestrials, so they took me out of my body, you know. And and it was in that state or whatever that I couldn't feel anything, you know, and it felt like they just whisked me away on this little fantasy thing or whatever, and I was aboard some kind of invisible craft, you know. It was weird, and they took me to the moon in another dimension. So it was very bizarre, you know. The people that were piloting the craft were these short, dwarfy-looking bluish beings, you know, and they wore masks.
Uh-huh.
So I thought that was very interesting that they wore masks. They wore masks that looked like people. So that's even more bizarre.
Okay.
Yeah, that's even more bizarre there. But they seem to venerate us a great deal, you know, our abilities to dream, our various, you know, human abilities that we forgot about, you know, our telepathy and all of that. So we are very valued, you know, to them.
The ability to dream. So not all species can dream?
Not quite the way we do, you know, because, you know, we're basically corporeal compared to them. You know, they're interdimensional or multidimensional beings, and it's only our weird perception of them that where we could actually see some formation of who they are or what they are, and it's all based on our perception. So it's not like that's even what they look like or anything. That's very strange. And you know, there's beings that are physical, three-dimensional beings that are physical, but they also use interdimensional portals and poles of morphogenics and all of that. And then there's the ones that actually live there, and they're interdimensional beings, similar to what the Native Americans, the Navajo, and that call Kachina clowns. So they're very, very much a mirror of our society and our ways on Earth as a corporeal being. And oftentimes we'll dream about them and we'll be like, oh, I had a nightmare. They showed me these horrible things or whatever. But it's basically to get you not to do it that way, you know. So it's
interesting.
It's a very strange.
Well, I just you know, wow. Have you met other people that witnessed the same way? What strikes to me is that what you said about they look different ways to different people, and so you know, have you talked to other people that were in the same situation, but what did it appear? Did they see identical or something different?
Yeah, it's you know, not to discount their experience at all, but their experience is based on their perception. That's the only context they really have. So, you know, when if they're having emotional issues or whatever, and it's not that people's babies aren't, you know, taken from them or they're impregnated by aliens or whatever people say, they could very well have perception issues there, you know. So it's one of those things that they're not really even sure about. That's why they go under hypnosis, which you guys do, and they try to figure some of those things out, you know. Mm-hmm. But I believe them. Don't get me wrong. I believe that they definitely had an experience. Like all people say, they would never even say something that weird if that's not what happened, you know. With the exception of some people, yeah.
It sounds like they're nice to you. You didn't get injured like Whitley says he was injured.
No, it wasn't like that at all. No. They figured I was being injured enough on Earth by humans.
Right.
You know, so it wasn't like that was that kind of experiment with me. A little bit different for me. You know.
So what type of beings did you interact with? Describe them to us. And so the ones that were doing the Playboy.
Oh gosh, she was beautiful, and you know, she lived in Lincoln Park in an apartment, and in her apartment she had giant, intricate little tiny jigsaw puzzles built around the house and on different walls, and she had just started one on her biggest wall, and she was done with that thing in 3 days. I mean, she was completely done with that whole jigsaw puzzle with little tiny pieces covering a whole wall in 3 days.
Wow.
So you had been to her place?
Oh yeah, absolutely. She was one of my mom's dates, you know.
Uh-huh.
She was after she met me and saw my artwork and all of that and what I was trying to do, she was more interested in me than fiddling around with my mom, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
She was like not interested in that at all after that. It was weird.
Well, do you think they knew who you were? Like
yeah,
they found you?
I do. I think I was definitely targeted in a good way, you might say. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it wasn't the first time that happened. Then the other weird thing was when I was 15 in an art class, they showed me a whole bunch of images on slideshows and all of that. And I know you've told you guys this story before, but this lady from Stanford Research Institute, whose name in whatever dimension was Amina Zarita, because I remember my art teacher made fun of her and called her Nagzima all the time, and the whole time she was there. And she was there only once, and I called my teacher and I said, how unusual would it have been for us to have had a sub come in or a speaker come in? And he said, highly unusual. And then he said he didn't recall when I told him about what happened. You know, that this lady had shown me all these slides, said that they were done by various artists. And I come to find out 40 years later that they were NASA images, because I have photographic memory. And I was looking at lunar orbiter images, and I'll be darned if I didn't start seeing exactly what she showed me in my art class in black and white. It was embedded in these seemingly boring, you know, moon images. But you zoom in just a little bit, and I got to the point where I didn't even have to zoom in. The entire image made a composition. So I started seeing things and directly in the perception of what I know taught me a long time ago about art and perception and how to see things and to draw what I see, you know. So it was very important for them to say that. So 40 years later, I started drawing what I see, and I'll be darned if there isn't a whole story embedded in all of our images, not just NASA images, in our regular photographs, you know, once you learn how to look at them that way.
So who do you think this person was that set you up like this?
Well, she was, you know, what they would call a Nordic or a very tall Swedish, German, Teutonic-looking woman, you know.
Uh-huh.
Very bizarre looking, almost unnatural, Barbie-like looking, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It was like that. It was like there's ones that are just completely unnatural looking. It's like the women who aspire to be like them, give it up. You're not going to be able to do that. That's from another planet, you know.
That's a good way to describe it. I've seen them, and I try to describe it. And I say, well, they look like they're the cover models on covers, you know, and
exactly.
Everybody tries to look like them. But the models on the covers have been photoshopped, so they look perfect. But these beings are perfect just as they are. They don't have any blemishes or distortion in their features. They're all, you know, balanced and.
So what's bizarre is their perception of us is just the same. They think we're beautiful, the way we are. You know, so it's like you can imagine they have a whole planet full of these beautiful people with beautiful headdresses and beautiful clothes and shiny stuff and everything else, but they really would like just to be who we are, you know, just to be able to live on a planet for a particular length of time. I'll live a whole life, you know, and just experience life. So that they really value that, you know.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah.
So you gave us a lot of information that's on the website, and so where do you want to go?
I want to know what was it like on board, and you know, in the stuff you already opened up.
Go ahead.
What was it like on?
what it was like was they taught me that all you have to do is think something and it'll happen. I said, where should I sit? Because I felt like I was standing in space, And they said, just imagine it and it'll be there, So I was like, okay, I'm going to sit on this chair or whatever, So I just sat down and there was something there. So it was exactly like that, And when I could see us getting closer to the moon, and I'll tell you, it doesn't look like what it looks like through a telescope. Not at all, not in that dimension anyway. I mean, it was full of color, full of life, color. And we sat down in the middle of the city, and it didn't seem like a crater, but of course, craters are huge, lots of space between them. But we sat down in the city, and it was like almost a Greco-Roman type city. That's what it looked like. And they had these really beautiful statues, and it was weird because you touched the statue or whatever, and whatever you thought would happen to the statue, So it was like that. You just think. Yeah, whatever you thought. Yeah, and it actually molded the statue to your liking, So I think there's a lot of that kind of weird creational stuff going on out there. They have living materials like metals and rocks and that, like living, So it interacts with your emotions and everything else. It's really weird.
So what did you imagine? What did you, besides a chair, what else did you create with your thought?
Well, I imagined a naked lady, and it happened, It was a very beautiful goddessy looking woman, that was all like posing like just in the magazine or whatever, It was cool. Mm-hmm. And there was this, I also imagined, I was looking at these little druid fellows, they were like little short, had hoodies on, kind of like the little Star Wars guys. And I imagined them, and statues of them started popping up, It was just a very strange little mental playground, And I'm sure it wasn't. I don't know if it was real or not. It was interdimensional, but they took me up and to talk to these two druidy looking guys or whatever, and they told me, they said that someday I will be doing something that changes things, and they said it was a subtle thing and just live your life or whatever, and it was very strange. I asked them, well, why are you all wearing masks? Because it was just a stupid kid question or whatever. And they said, because we love you, and they said that they felt ugly, that they felt ugly compared to us. So
I've had that. They protect us from our emotional reaction to them looking differently. They don't want to frighten us, so
right.
They probably protecting you so you wouldn't have a knee-jerk reaction to their appearance.
Yeah, and I told them to just take their mask off. I don't mind. I don't care about that, And so they took their mask off, and they weren't even ugly. They were just looking like little people, And it was very sincere, and the emotions of it, you know what I mean? And they all thought it was wonderful. I walked out of the building, and they were all happy, that they could finally take their masks off, they could look at each other.
Was there sexual dimorphism? Were there male and female bearded ones or anything like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There was all kinds of different looking ones, that just like we are, except for little. It was weird. But the lady that was escorting me around or whatever was kind of like I know. She was very beautiful, except for she had dark hair, not short blonde hair, and she had this outfit on, that seemed to kind of shimmer and change shapes and colors and stuff. It was really cool. But anyway, they took me back, and it was I was sad about it, 'cause they took me back, and I could feel that something happened to me in my body, and I could see blood and all of that. And my mom took me to the bathroom to hide everything and give me an enema and all of that jazz. And so this was a routine thing in my childhood. I thought it was normal,
Where were you bleeding from?
Yeah, what were you? What caused you to bleed?
Well, I was bleeding from my butt. I could feel it was very wet. Yeah. So it wasn't aliens that did anything. No, it was humans. My mom was into ritualistic cultish stuff. So and a lot of those guys were the ones that were really bad during my childhood, claimed to be straight, and they were pillars of the community. They were complete psychopaths, I can tell you that. And the ones I really enjoyed were the weird ones, or perceived weird, like I Know, or Ringling Brothers clowns, or the guy from the dad from the Brady Bunch. I knew him. He came to our house all the time, and Nipsey Russell, and yeah, it was like that. My mom was a bartender, and she worked at Mr. Kinney's downtown Chicago, and she worked at a lot of gay bars, around that area. So my childhood was full of color. I was best friends with a transvestite named Tracy Love, and we used to talk all the time, and she used to take us out to the baseball game, and there was a lady named Kathy who looked like a CIA agent. She probably was, and so was Denise Beasley. But yeah, she would take me away from all that. A lot of my mom's good friends, would take us away because they didn't want us around that. They really felt bad for us. They didn't want us to be around that. So we got trafficked in a good way sometimes, and go to their house and listen to music.
Who's the we? Who else was with you? What do you?
My sister.
Another child?
Yeah, my sister Tracy. She's a year younger than me, and they just loved her. They took her to Disneyland all the time. They beat the shit out of me all the time. But they took her to Disneyland, and they were very nice to her. They bought her Nikes and whatever she wanted. They took me to the thrift store, and I was lucky to get there and stuff. So it was kind of like that. My sister felt sorry for me sometimes on my birthday because, they wouldn't really acknowledge it too much. And so in the backyard, we'd have like a little kid birthday party with the easy bake oven. We'd make little tiny cakes and stuff like that. And she got me these horrible little plaid shorts, that didn't fit. And they were like yellow striped with green or something, but I wore them because I loved my sister and she meant well, but she was trying to buy me clothes because no one did that. I felt like that little troll in Harry Potter that got a sock, you know what I mean? I really felt that way.
Wow. Now, what was the background of your parents that they got into such things? Were they religious cult?
Yeah, I didn't know it at the time. She was friends with Michael Aquino, and so they were down the Egyptian path of Ankhs and and all these secret hermetic things. So it wasn't like a satanic thing. It was more of a sexual ritualistic Rosicrucian type thing.
Wow.
And and I was the target, to some of that.
Do you know why they hit you, beat you? Was that just to break you or something?
Yeah, it was to totally break me down. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I thought that was normal. And I thought when I went to school that all kids were getting beat and raped, I thought it was completely normal.
Oh my God.
But my teachers thought it was weird, They would even talk about me, when they knew I wasn't listening. They, one of them would say, "What about Bret Sheppard?" And the other one would go, "Yeah," They thought I was the weirdest kid they've ever seen in their lives,
Who was saying you were the weirdest kid? Who's the they you're talking about right then?
My art
teachers.
My art teachers, yeah, they didn't know I heard that.
Were they relating to the content of your drawings? Is that what was weird about
what was weird about my drawings is I would contextualize some of the things that were happening to me, and some of the things that I thought about my mom and her friends, and I draw her little get-togethers, her parties, with Ringling Brothers clowns that were on the couch, having sex with each other while they were totally gay, and while there was a video playing of bootlegged cartoons, where this guy was running around and a gorilla was trying to do him and stuff like that. And anyway, I remember that while I was playing with my trucks on the floor and stuff, and it was just strange. I later, when I was 15 years old, I started drawing these things. Even 11 years old, I started drawing these things, and my art teachers thought I was completely wackadoodle. It was like there was this lizard person that was doing it with my mom with a knife. And I mean, just Jeffrey Dahmer shit. Okay. But, it was stuff like that.
Stuff like that. I mean, back then, I don't know what year that was, but maybe are they being trained now to look for stuff like that? Kids drawing, acting out what's actually going on?
Oh, yeah. The counselors were extraordinarily confused, and they were definitely concerned about what was going on. And I was often in the counselor's office, and I was like, what am I doing here, They were like not trying to discuss my future. They were like, "Are you okay?" So they ended up putting me in a. They put me in a group camp or whatever, and my mom didn't even know I was there. She didn't even care. She was probably drunk or something. But I went to this camp when I was 15 called Operation Snowball, and it was like if you take a little ball full of yarn that you wore around your neck and you gave it to somebody and gave them a hug and they tied their yarn to the string and stuff like that. But anyway, there was a there, and this guy was kind of weird, He had me in this room, in the cabin or whatever, and he was teaching me how to hypnotize myself, and I'm sure he meant well, but it was kind of freaking me out because as I went under pretty quick, which I do often, and he was like, and now you can barely feel your feet, and it's going up your leg, and eventually, all this stuff. So he was hypnotizing me or teaching me how to self-hypnotize, and I'm not sure exactly what happened after I was out. You know what I mean? It's like, whatever. You know what I mean? But
what part of the world was this? Around Chicago, you said?
Yeah, this was around Chicago, and my first girlfriend that I had when I was 15 years old, her name was Myra, and she was, her whole family were FBI agents, and they were investigating my mom for trafficking and all kinds of other things, drugs and this and that. But it was about the prostitution ring in Chicago. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And guess who was a part of the signing off on that? Robert Mueller and Kenneth Starr.
Oh, right. Connect the dots.
Yeah, connect the dots. They're always called in when there's some kind of sexual scandal of any kind having to do with the FBI or federal government or boys that are invited to the White House, that sort of thing. So these guys are always invited to come defend them with, and accuse people of false memory syndrome and all kinds of other crap. So, yeah, that happened, I'm sure Robert Mueller at the time was just in charge of the FBI and literally signed off on it just because he had to or whatever. But he didn't know the whole case. But that scumbag, Kenneth Starr, he knows all about that and all the child trafficking and everything that went on in the Midwest. And they closed a place down in Indiana called Naked City. And it was just out in the middle of nowhere. And this guy was a complete pervert, but he was after like little girls and stuff. Had little girls jumping around on a trampoline naked and stuff like that and was getting off on it. Anyway, he got caught being a pedophile. And they slapped him on the wrist because he's rich, and sent him out to California to do the same kind of crap. So I don't know. I don't have any faith in our government as far as people say that there's a QAnon and that they're going after all the pedos and everything and Pizzagate and all this other crap. That's a lie. And I'll just tell you straight up, that's a lie. Because the kingpin of all the pedos is our president and is Jeffrey Epstein's friend, But that's just that. It's just an awareness that I have because of what I've been through.
Right. So wow. So.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Hey, some of the people at the beach were saying, Epstein was taken out, and he was, but it was a body, and it wasn't Epstein. And when a guy that has information on so many big shots is protected, and they can't kill him, they just give him another identity and put him somewhere else. What do you think about that hypothesis?
That's exactly what they do. In fact, a lot of people that they think are dead are just retired. They've given them another identity. Famous people, they can't retire like normal people, They have to fake a death or this or that to get out of the public eye, to not become.
It's like Hitler being. Hitler was in a castle in Argentina. That Bormann was running the Nazis.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. But I was excited to come on here and talk to Sasha about the genocide of the goddess societies. Anyway, did that get off track a little?
No, it's
fine.
perfect. It's right on
track. No, it's because you.
We need to talk about this.
Well, no, but what we're talking about is how you basically were put into altars and reclaiming your altars, and it's part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I was also part of a long-term experiment, SRI was doing to see if people that were severely abused when they were young, which they knew I was, idiots. Their test was to see if you would eventually become a perpetrator yourself because of the abuse, and they found that was completely inconclusive because your only context or your sexual orientation is with adults, not children.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
So that's a big misnomer, It's like it depends on the person, but that's a big misunderstanding in America, that fact.
So this thing happened in my neighborhood in Pittsburgh when I was growing up, and I haven't really come out, but it's kind of sounds similar. They used the churches. They created this back in the 50s. They created a swinger club. Anyway, there's a person was my brother's friend, his age, ended up being a perpetrator. He did end up, attacking little boys, and he spent a number of years in jail. He's out now. But so I wondered, even researching that, I wonder what was done to him that was different. But we've tracked this down, my sister and I can't really talk about it with my brother, but I'm starting to have a conversation around it because it was throughout the whole neighborhood. And there was a man in the neighborhood that took photos of all the women, and I think it was just the girl children, but I didn't see the pictures, for like 40 years, nude photos of all the neighborhood people. And he was stabbed 17 times to death, and my sister got a hold of the pictures, and so she was, we were just processing, like, oh my God.
That's a special kind of individual, that's for sure. And I can tell you firsthand that it is not an environmental issue. It's not something that they learn or anything else. You would have to be that way. You would have to be hateful to hate. You would have to be, a psychopath to be a killer. You know what I mean? So this is the situation when it, in the context of, does someone that was abused become a perpetrator or whatever? That's just absolute nonsense. It depends on the person.
Was your mother abused? Would be then one question we have.
Well, yeah, she did say that she was messed around with once, but it was no big deal with her uncle, with my great uncle. It happens, whatever. but it wasn't something that made her the way she was. She got very interested in a sort of perverse way with some of these ancient societies, and she was introduced to it by a Jewish lady that lived out in Miller Beach. Her name was Paula Melzer, and her mom Dorothy Melzer. Which they were very nice people. Paula eventually became very religious, and I think is some kind of minister in Florida or something. She's a very nice lady. She always has been, but she got a real kick out of taking my mom to all these different types of churches. Even the Holy Rollers ones, the fun ones. With all the people with Martin Luther King fans and everything. She had a good time doing that. It was Gary, Indiana. What can I say? There was a lot of those, types of churches there.
So that was right after. You're younger than Michael Jackson, right?
Yes, a lot younger, really. And
a lot younger.
He did play at my mom's high school, and I didn't live too far away from their family at all. I was on Clay Street, and they lived downtown. But yeah, and Janet wasn't even hardly raised there at all.
Oh, okay. So they had moved by the time Janet was.
Yeah,
so she was.
Yeah. Janet was in California.
On that show.
Right.
She was on that show.
She was on good times. Yeah. It was with JJ and Dynamite and all that jazz. Yeah. But yeah, I've got a pretty good memory of all that stuff that was going on. Yeah, we had newscasters at the house and all kinds of people. It was crazy. It really was crazy town. It's a nutty memory to have with all of that, all that weird stuff going on.
What made all these famous people come to your house?
They loved my mom. My mom was very charismatic. She claimed to be a witch, and like a good witch, sort of.
Uh-huh.
And so she wore black onyx all the time, and the type, silky black pajamas, that sort of thing. She was always in her silky pajamas, when all these people were over. And she had candles lit all the time.
Like Beyonce.
Yeah, sort of like that. Right. Very much so like Beyonce,
Is
my mom, no.
Still alive?
No, she's been gone for a long time. My dad's gone too. And I tried to take care of both of them. Yeah. I tried to take care of both of them, not take care of them like the mob, but to be there, when they died, because I do honor my parents,
Mm-hmm.
even though they have absolutely zero honor for me, probably even now after they're gone, And
what was the cause of their deaths?
My mom died of breast cancer, which went metastasized quickly, and it might have been because she did all drinking and drugs all those years. I don't know.
Right.
But it was also the medical system that killed her, obviously, because she went and did radiation and chemotherapy, and you might as well just kiss your butt goodbye if you take all that crap, That's just nonsense. But yeah, I'd rather die slowly with the cancer than go fast with chemo and all that, It's like, wow.
Right.
That's not going to help. You're going to be dead in like 5 months after that. He had complications with prostate cancer. So, yay, genetics, I'm in such good shape. But it's weird because I don't have any of that crap, I didn't drink or do drugs or anything else.
Yeah. It doesn't mean you're going to get it.
My
cancer,
father... my father...
Like anger.
Yeah, exactly. My father lived in East Texas. He was kind of a redneck, and he was a Boilermaker. So he was a journeyman iron worker and went off, working on, very good at his job and all that. And every time I called him, like on my birthday or thought to call him, he never called me, by the way. But my dad was never in my life, hardly ever. We went squirrel hunting when I was very young, and I got poison ivy, I think, so it wasn't a great memory.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. I got poison ivy, and then we went back with the squirrels he shot, and then he was making me touch them and clean them in the garage, which that explains that one nightmare I have, But
what's the nightmare you have? Fitting
Oh,
squirrels?
it's a nightmare of a witch who's pointing at a weird creature in the grass and telling me to pick it up. It was kind of a combo of my mom and my dad making me touch something. You know, of course, my dad wasn't in the nightmare because I still thought he was a god, and cried every time I thought about him. You know, but that's how kids are. You know, yeah. Yeah. But he was very East Texas.
Did you have any other ET contact to help you get through this incredibly hard existence?
Yes, I did. I'm very close with those same interdimensional beings. Of course, they don't present themselves that particular way anymore. And they sort of like show me a bunch of graphics in my dreams and put me in different scenarios in that, you know, to teach me things. So it's a very strange dreamscape type of thing. You know, sometimes I'll wind up. One time I wound up in this this darkened black area. It's sort of like you've seen Stranger Things, you know, with the upside down world, and there's just like flakes of snow everywhere and floating around. And well, it was kind of like that. And these beings were black and slimy, and they were like just flying but slithering in front of me, and there was this queen. I think that's really what they look like, to be honest, you know. And they kind of look like one of those bug beings, you know, but kind of pretty, if that is weird to say. And very gentle, pretty type being, but it looked like Syl from the Alien movies. You know what I mean? Like from that, you know, from H.G. Geiger, that sort of thing.
Right.
But
yeah.
very, very sweet being. I was telepathic with it and everything. She wanted me to see that world. You know what I mean? It was just very strange. Because things are just not what they seem, I guess. But that was the only time I ever saw like aliens out of context. You know, that like my own context or perception wasn't involved at all. It was just there, like vividly. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the other time that happened, one time that happened was a blue lady being or whatever that looked just like those goddesses from the Eastern artwork, you know, except for a much deeper blue. Yeah, and she was like right in front of my face, and she went shh, you know, and put her finger up to her mouth and went shh like that, and it was like to tell me to calm down, you know, that I'm going to be getting all these downloads and information and just take a break. You know what I mean? So I did. I took a break for a while, but you know me, I can't help but post all kinds of crap, you know?
Right. You got
so
any
yeah.
Sasha?
No, what I really want to get an opportunity to pump your brain about is Eastern Europe. That's what I'm
Eastern Europe.
History of. Yeah.
Well, wait. I have one more question on the ET stuff. What was your latest encounter? And then we'll go to Eastern Europe. What was your latest encounter? And what was going on?
Well, my latest encounter was 2007. That was clear enough or vivid enough to explain. And this was in real life. You know, I was driving down Highway 10 with at the time my boyfriend John. You know, who was all totally getting on my nerves the whole trip because he was bitchy. You know what I mean? He was like spoiled brat bitchy, like my legs or you know, all this crap. And so we were driving down Highway. Yeah, I know, huh? We were driving down Highway 10, and we were going through Benson, Arizona, and suddenly, to my left side, you know, toward the mountains, a craft came and went, you know, no noise or nothing, and it went right in front of my car and was driving in front of my car with me. You know, I have to explain that, right? And this was for like a mile, and then it veered off over this building. And a thing came out, and I watched the thing come out and go back up into the thing and everything. And then I lost time because I was suddenly back where I was down the road and passing by that same scene with that thing over the building, then the thing coming out and going back in. And then it twisted, and flew in front of my car, and like nothing, went all the way to the mountains and attached to this great big huge black blob is what I could see in the sky, you know. And it was like a star. It just had one light shining like a star. And this whole ship, bigger than a football field, you know, seriously, moved across the sky. It was so weird, you guys. Seriously, that was the weirdest thing. And John saw it, and he goes, that must be some kind of government experiment or something. I don't know what that is.
Wow, a witness.
Yeah, we were witnesses to that. And so you asked me, you know, what was the last contact with the being? Well, during that lost time, I didn't think nothing happened, but I went back and I went down the road, and there were these weird MPs, you know, that weren't supposed to be there at 3 o'clock in the morning in the middle of nowhere. And they weren't checking for fruit or vegetables or any nuts or anything like that. They were looking in our car with flashlights, you know. And I was like, why is the military police out here? It should be like, shouldn't it be like forest agents, forest reserve people or something like that? Forest rangers or something. They weren't forest rangers. They were MPs, like military, you know. So it was just like creepy, weird, and great and everything. Anyway, we went driving down, and when we stopped at a motel, I think it was in El Paso, that night I had a vision of this being that was showing me my car driving down the road on his little screen with the UFO in front of me. It was like, you know, to say, yes, it really happened or something. You know what I mean? It was just a weird, very vivid dream. And it made me think that we all have this weird guide out in space or interdimensionally, you know, that's showing us stuff and guiding us at like a control panel, you know. That's weird. That's just totally weird. And it makes me think that's like a part of us somehow. You know what I mean?
I've interviewed guys that have the exact same sort of story, and I've heard this before. It's happened to other people, just as you described it.
Yeah, exactly. This is totally bizarre, but you know that's the thing.
Yeah, they showed the screen, and they took him back to his first kiss in a car when he was a teenager, and it was like everything was there, and they were just showing him his own incident, and he was on board a ship, and it's like, what?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, that's the really weird and cool thing with me, Sasha. You don't have to hypnotize me. I remember everything, you know, every single thing, even the interdimensional subconscious stuff, you know, you'd be surprised. But
to
hypnotize me would just validate it. You know what I mean? It would just validate the things that happen.
Right. Well, hypnosis is just getting you to relax and focus on what you're.
But it's like each thing that you perceive can expand.
Right.
And it has a voice that communicates to you, and it's a mask for other things, and it's got a resonance with experiences in your childhood, your here and now, your parallel existences. And so all those things are resonating, and when you're open to it, the meditators and people that have taken drugs are able often to have the enjoyment of all these different levels and their interplay.
But I understand your hesitancy because you don't know what happened when whatever they were teaching you self-hypnosis, you don't know what really happened.
Yeah, exactly. I think the best, okay? Don't get me wrong. I don't think, hey, everyone's a pervert, you know. But it's just that, well, you know, he did have the opportunity there, and I wouldn't have known, you know.
All right.
So I'm not,
about
hey,
6
you know.
minutes.
Definitely don't want to say. You know.
Don't want to.
Sorry.
So we have 6 minutes before the top of the hour in our commercial. So, where do you want to go next? You said what, honey? You wanted to do?
Yeah. Let's get into that goddessy stuff. Yeah.
So what's happened in terms of history in a way is the Anunnaki who left the Anunnaki who left records about their settlement in the Near East and North Africa and Deep Africa.
Right.
didn't talk about all kinds of earlier people that are all over the globe and had different shaped skulls, and so the history that it comes down, it's so distorted because it's latecomers, and so I could fill in some stuff for us.
Take away, Bret, and then commercial, and we'll do the rest of the second hour. Go ahead.
You going to commercial, or you want me to read something?
No, in 5 minutes. So give us like some basics, and then when we come back after the break, we'll continue.
Okay. Well, basically, ancient belief systems all around the globe were based on the observations and communications with nature and culture. Hunters and gatherers had rituals because of their heavy dependency on Earth. There were various perceptual entities, rain gods, thunder gods, gods of the harvest, but all nature gods were under the creator, which was mainly looked upon as female energy. These female creator goddesses were later turned masculine by patriarchy societies, and even interpreted today are biased and misguided as patriarchal authors take liberties to write about ancient creator entities all as male gods. What is important here is that the sex of the gods, but not the sex of the gods, but rather the communication that took place between humans and the higher powers, which I consider extraterrestrial, and natural communication with natural universe. Some of these, the most profound communications of these spirits along the Dnieper and Danube River, the River Jordan and Northwest India. These rivers were named after the goddess Danu and the Tuatha Danann, or the tribe of Danu. They were the Balkan tribes in the ancient times, specifically the Dardanians, named after King Dardanus the First, who was Hellenistic, by the way. It appears as though extraterrestrials have been communicating with our ancestors for thousands of years. How's that?
Oh, wow. I love it. Yes.
Right.
It's the same kind of things that the jumpers and others are basically talking about. It was a difference between Minoan and Mycenaean, and the last of the goddess cultures was Minoan, and it got wiped out by the basically the warlike patriarchals.
Can you guys kind of give us a time frame when you start referencing these ancient
4,000, at least 4,000 years ago, they had wrote about 20,000 years ago in Ukraine.
Okay, so 4,000 years ago, they wrote about 20,000 years ago.
Yeah,
so
that's correct.
They were writing about time period 20,000 years ago, and the part of the world they were describing was, what did you say, the Ukraine?
No, along the Danube.
Yeah, it was called the civilization was called Arata, and in the Sumerian text, they said we migrated to where we are living now thousands of years ago, but they were unable to write down where they were because they didn't know how to write then. They had no real, but that's not exactly true, you guys. They had a system of writing, and it was like Bukar, it was like rune stones and that sort of thing. So they did have some kind of communication. Okay. And later on, the inquisitive scribes and archivists in the royal palaces studied the oral tradition, information, and the attempt to find out about the past. And they said their people came to this land from the mountainous countries to the northeast, like, what do you call them? The Caucasus Mountains. But it was also said that some of them had come via sea from the land called Dilmun.
Dilmun, I know where that is. Yes,
Dilmun in the east.
That's in the Sinai Peninsula.
Oh, Sinai Peninsula. Okay, so you're talking about the Caucasus, with the origination of the white people, right?
Sumerians. The people that
right.
Came up with the Sumerian civilization, cuneiform, and all of that jazz. They were today. One of the tribes are the modern day Armenians. In the city of Van in Arata.
Yeah.
Arata.
And Arata was also on the Indus Valley in modern Pakistan was the name of Inanna's fief there.
Right.
Shakti in Hindu terms.
Yeah, Inanna or Imamu in some cultures, Sabel in some areas, and in Phrygia later on was called Sabel. these goddesses were very ancient. I'll let you go to that thing.
Well, that's not going to go to break. We're talking about the goddess. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
All right.
Aloha once again, and welcome back to Stargate Cosmos. And I'm your host. Got feedback. I'm your host, Janet Care Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin. Our producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the Mad Painter. You're listening to Revolution Radio, Studio B at revolution.radio. And today's guest is Bret Colin Sheppard. And we're talking about all kinds of stuff. But before we get back to our show with Bret, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to revolution.radio. And up at the top left-hand tab, there is a donation tab. And please go there and make your donation. You can make your one-time donation there. And there's a Patreon button. And you can make a donation there. And I think that is recurring. And then there's an address. There's 3 ways to make your donations. And we really appreciate your donations. Thank you very, very much. Dr. Lessin, you're back.
Yeah, so we're talking about this huge shift in the ethos of humanity from a partnership orientation where women were honored, where there was no fortifications or stacks of arms or slaves or war, and there was free trade, and people were basically safe in a sane society, and being overrun ultimately by patriarchal Kurdian societies that I guess Rhiannon Eisler puts it really powerfully. It's the blade versus the chalice, and the blade cuts. Seems to be what's dominant to this day, and I think that's what your research is telling us. And I'm really interested in. I guess it comes down to the specific history of these huge empires that came and fell and warred with each other in Eastern Europe. It's fascinating, and you've got that sense of it that I get lost when I try to track it, Bret.
Well, yeah, in the ancient steppes, and the Near East or whatever, there were people that came down and they built temples, and an interesting little factoid or whatever, the mummies they dug up with the red hair and the tattoos and all that in China, East China, that was the Eastern steppe. And basically in Göbekli Tepe, there were anamorph symbols on the rocks, that had a lot to do with astrology and their ancient beliefs. Well, if you look at the lion or the tiger lion figure on the stone, it's the exact same art as the tattoo on the guy's body, the exact same art. And if you look at the way the stones are made, they're exactly like the picture stones are. So this empire, this Pelagian Arata empire, stretched all the way from the steppes through the Ukraine, all the way to the Danube River Valley in the Balkans. It was vast. And much of Turkey was influenced by all of these groups that migrated down there. And one of them was, like I said, the Armenians, who were at the time called the Chaldea. And isn't that interesting? Uh-huh. Yeah, and the Hittites were up north. Yeah, the Hittites were up north, and they were also from the Balkans. They were occupying the halozones, the basically the shoreline of the southern Black Sea, and these people came from this enormous Trotzian, basically what the Greeks call ancient Greece. You've got the ancient Romanians who are the Dacians. And they call all these people Vinca Empire, which is absolutely ridiculous. But they all use the same trade type symbol language, which was if you look online, you can find the Vinca symbols. Well, these symbols are ancient Scythian, and it's the same language that Maria Orsich wrote in. It wasn't ancient Sumerian. It was the Scythian, old Scythian language, and that's a fact. So when David what's his name, Wilcox says that was ancient Sumerian, it's not. Okay, it's just not.
No.
Anyway, this Balkan area is full of a rich, ancient society that the patriarchy tried to cover up, and they do to this day. They call their language the devil's language. They demonize any goddess figures and actually turn them into male demons. They did this in the 15th century in the Goetia, when they wrote the Goetia with all the little demon symbols of the 72 spirits of Solomon and all of that. It was all a lie, and these symbols were put together with old cuneiform and all of this other perverted, type language or trade language. And basically, these symbols are the same Mitra symbols that the Romans carried around. Every time they went somewhere, they made a little statue to Mitra or some kind of little temple so that they could do their worshiping to Mitra. The Mitra thing is from the old Brahmin. It's a carry on from the old Brahmin religions of the East, which were the first type of patriarchy, masculine, one man God religion, son of a god, that sort of thing. This carried on. Even the ancient Jewish people or Hebrews had a goddess named Ashera before all of this took place, who was married to Yahweh or as a consort of Yahweh and all of that. But that was much later. But these Brahmin religions, carried all over the world, and all of our world religions are based on these things. The scribes, the Chaldean scribes, who they were very close to the Sumerians, of course, in trade and everything else. They were scribes, for the Sumerians, and one of them was named Abrahman, which was a title, means a Brahmin, okay, not Abraham.
Wow.
And this is a guy that was a scribe there, who they call Abraham, in like modern times, but he was a Brahmin, and there was a Moses or Amos, who actually pulled together, invented all of these draconian laws of the land. He was a landlord, this is the Moses character, okay? He was a landlord, and that's where the 10 Commandments came from these draconian laws.
Far out.
Yeah, and they're impossible laws to follow. Yeah, they're impossible laws to follow on purpose.
Like what were
so yeah, that was the influence of the impossible laws to follow, which is of course draconian laws, right? Basically.
Yeah, like what? Give me an example. Do you have some of the laws they were asking us to follow?
Well, there's complexities in it, but the whole list of laws was actually written by the Chaldeans, and it was taken to Glastonbury Abbey, and it was called the Bronze Book and the Sons of Fire. So the book of the Sons of Fire has the list of all Amos's laws. Isn't that interesting? So
Janet
these
wants
laws
to know,
were
what were some of the laws?
Well, if you steal something, that your hand should be cut off, that sort of thing.
Oh,
so some of the weirder laws that are just completely unreasonable laws, to control people with.
Wow.
So yes, if you looked at another man's wife or whatever, that you would be killed, by the man, and it was allowed. And they even had laws of when it was appropriate to rape someone's little girl, during a wartime.
Oh.
So yeah, these laws came and they seeped into the Jewish encyclopedias and all of that, the old ones, from the Old Testament and that. So it seeped into their culture, and they still, to this day, try to defend that, as some kind of sick thing. Like it's okay if the little, kid or whatever is, before puberty, or it's okay as long as you do it from the back and not the front. Just weird laws,
Wow.
And so, yeah, those carried on to even in the Christian religion in our culture. And there are Christian groups that think, that the woman stays a virgin or whatever, as long as they just have sex with her from the back. You see what I'm saying? Laws.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't count. She's still a virgin, right? Okay. So anyway, this is the kind of, I feel, trust me, a little bit uncomfortable talking about all the. I'll do it. The Brahmins had come in, and this ought to be interesting to you, Sasha. They demonized women. There was one woman demon that they made or whatever that came in and suckled the boys and ate the girls and all this other crap. It was Lakisma or something like that, and they created a talisman who is Pazuzu, or the Anzu bird. But this Pazuzu, yeah, right, the Pazuzu or whatever, they would actually, he was a mean ass god, right? And they put this this little talisman in their child's crib or whatever to protect her against this horrible demon-like female or whatever that would slither in the window, without being seen and kill their babies and stuff. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So this Pazuzu was actually, the one from The Exorcist. If anyone ever saw that movie, at the beginning of the movie, there's Pazuzu, this big Pazuzu god with wings, and he's got his arm clawed up and stuff like that. That's Pazuzu, right? Anzu bird.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And that's from the Ajiji, right, Sasha?
Yeah, he was the commander of the of Mars base, and they invaded Earth and took over the landing platform. And he was a mean guy. He was a very powerful.
He was a badass
captain.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. He was executed.
So yeah,
he was defeated and executed.
So yeah, it was executed. Yeah. And the face on Mars is who? Sasha.
That was there earlier. That was Alalu, an ex-king who was marooned there for biting off the king's manhood, whatever that meant. And so he was marooned there.
Yeah.
And so that's a different guy. That's Alalu. But Alalu's grandson was this other guy, Anzu, who stayed with Alalu while he died, and he was then Anzu was then made head of Mars base, and the guys at Mars base mutinied. They weren't getting any sex or beer, and so they took over. And that's what happened. And then they took the best women and started their own village in Jericho.
Right, but the moral of that story is don't let Alalu down there at all, right? So
they basically he died on Mars, and that statue was there. He was with his eagle helmet pulled back, looking at Earth. Yeah. He was the first of Nibiran to come to Earth, and he found those little flecks of gold in the Persian Gulf, and then later on they found huge veins of gold in Southeast Africa.
Yes, absolutely. No. Oh gosh, I just love talking to you about all this stuff. So no oral sex with bird people. Is that what you're saying?
There's a lot of traditions about really bird people being in Egypt, and I certainly wouldn't discount it at all. And knowing the genetic abilities of some of the alien races, absolutely. So what happens in revisionist anthropology, instead of regarding stuff as inherently symbolic just because they're shown with a head of an ibis or something, if we set aside our prejudices and say, perhaps that's literally what the artist saw, why should I assume that he didn't? And when you start thinking that way, you get so much more information.
Well, that brings me to this thing. In ancient art, people drew and carved what was in nature. They saw the divine in nature, which was considered feminine. The ancient fertility symbols were that the female figures, not so much male. The phallus came much later in our histories. We can see how important the stars were to ancient people, and they labeled them with an animal symbol because animals were sacred, especially the bull or Taurus. And based on the base belief systems of Paleolithic times, they're like on the stones in Göbekli Tepe, and in Ireland or in rather Scotland, the picture stones are also the same type of animal symbols, and also in the cave art, the bulls and the all of that. So there's a very rich astrological history to all these symbols. They mean something, like in the Nazca lines and all of that. All of those symbols are astrological symbols meant to be viewed from the air, by their sky gods, the stars and all of that. So when the Earth spoke natural based language, like the Vinca symbols and all that, those Vinca symbols are actually our old High Scythian. They're the old Ukrainian language, and the simple form of the graphic communication from the old Balkan tribes depicted what nature taught them, like some of the Fukar rune stones or whatever, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. If you can imagine, there were whole sets of them that meant gods and numerology and a calendar. Some meant astrology and energy. Some meant animals. Some meant hunting and gathering. And of course, there's more of a complexity there. Some meant weather and shelter, and some meant earth features. And these symbols were, many scholars fail to decipher. They said, we don't know what they are or what they mean or whatever. I do, okay? That's what they mean. And there's more of a rich complexity culturally with those symbols, like even some of those symbols are seen in the Native American ancient symbols. So it's really cool. And
if the way they are assembled with each other, can you use them as elements and put them in different associations to yield different meanings?
Yes, like one is the right side up, what you call a swastika, which is a sun symbol, and it's under astrology and energy. So there's the sun symbol, and there's there's that weird 3-pronged thing. What's interesting? The same writing and symbols are right in Las Lunas, New Mexico. There's a thing there called the Decalogue Stone, and it was written by the Converso Jews that carried this trade language from Carthage to Spain, and they crossed over when their descendants went to Mexico with the Spanish conquistadors, and they came up through Mexico, up through New Mexico, and they actually hid their Sabbath worship or whatever, and that's where you get the Decalogue stones from this converso Jews who were literally burned at the stake if the Spanish Catholics found out who they were. So it's a very interesting story.
Were there hundreds of people, or was this thousands of people or hundreds of people?
Hundreds of people they brought here.
Hundreds, wow.
Hundreds, yeah. That were literally of course, they were called converso Jews because they hid their Jewish faith, their Hebrew faith, and they pretended to be Catholic. So that's
right.
why they ended up here in the Southwest. That's a very interesting thing that happened, in the 1400s, 1500s, that sort of around that area. So yeah, these symbols are amazing. This was the old Baltic language from Illyria and from the whole Errata Empire, which was also they called it the Pelagian Empire. They didn't call it Errata. The Sumerians called it Errata. The Sumerians called it Errata, but what they called themselves was Pelagian. That's what they called them. And so, these anyway, these are the same symbols, like I said, that the mediums in Nazi Germany used to communicate with extraterrestrials. There's your little link there. These extraterrestrials gave them this language.
Mm-hmm.
So they gave them Pukar.
I just think or wonder if way older than Göbekli Tepe and those structures are the huge things in Romania and Bosnia.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they have the same symbols or whether it's
huge
even
temples. Yes, they do. They absolutely do. They're on the rocks and everything.
That's what I went. I saw
symbols.
A whole bunch of things. The same ones. They were on these little devices that looked like a four-sided pyramids.
Exactly.
Things that you can hold the size of a hand.
Right. This is the birthplace of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess, who was later demonized. That statue that ended up in London or whatever, but it was a relief statue of the goddess Inanna, and she's got like bee wings and claw feet and everything else.
Yeah.
That was not traditionally. Yeah, that was a demonization of that goddess. This was not something to say this is a favorable person that you would like to sleep with. This was like like the Bible's Lilith. You know what I mean? This was a scary monster to these people. So to the patriarchy, this was a scary monster, and she was based on a real life person named Semiramis, and she was literally the queen of heaven, and she was the queen of the Assyrian Empire. So it was kind of a demonization of her and Tammuz, which was the first God King Mary type figure, like from the Bible or whatever. That was Tammuz and Semirath the third, I think her name was, and the Greeks called her later Semiramis, and said that she was born. Her mother was like a weird mermaid witch creature, out of the sea. So it was just something weird that I'd share. But it's how they came across later and demonized these women of power, I mean, this lady was literally for quite a long time the head of the Assyrian Empire.
It's it's an archetypal thing, just like Hillary being dissed by Trump.
Same exactly
archetypal pattern.
Oh yeah. Yeah, these pre-Sumerian cultures are from the north of the Black Sea, and they migrated. A migration occurred around the Black Sea, and of course through the Caucasus Mountains and that, and you get groups. So the ones that were actually down there, who did not migrate, they were Syrian and Iranian horse people and that sort of thing. But these Balkan tribes are the ones that as the Sumerians. Those are the people, and they migrated down there because they were even the Sumerians, the ones that were like born there, who were probably from Iran, into Iraq, and they migrated there, and they were born there, but they had not developed anything yet. This is pre-Sumerian Urartu culture. And basically they talked about in their writings, these basically blonde-haired, blue-eyed people that came and made a civilization. So they erected their civilization. They were pretty simple, farmy type people. They farmed and they weren't stupid. They had dogs and they had, horses and cattle and everything else. So they lived a much simpler life before, who we know as Sumerians came in and built cities and temples and all of that, erected temples to their gods and goddesses. And these gods and goddesses you can find in the later Greek mythology. These were the ancient Greeks from Illyria and Macedonia and Dacia and the folks along the Dnieper River Valley, or the Arata people, So yeah, these are very, very ancient tribes.
So if we go even further back, like one of my colleagues in UK was saying, that there was a continent of Atlantis whose denizens had a longer skull. That's how she looks at it. And these people covered all the northern lands, and then they were displaced by round-headed people. So there was ancient people from Atlantis, which that were peopling all of northern Europe.
Yeah, well, if you look at even what Herodotus thought the world looked like, back in 800 BC or so, the world, they knew absolutely nothing of the Atlantic Ocean aside from thinking that it was a great river. Okay, and they didn't even know about South Africa. They thought that South Africa was an ocean because they would run into a big lake like Lake Victoria or something. They thought they were at the ocean. So, there were, that's where the Nile ends, by the way, Lake Victoria, Victoria Falls and all that. So it's interesting that the Mambudi tribe who is in that area are still, have the ancient DNA from that long ago, from 20,000, 100,000 years ago, actually, from 100,000 years ago. And even they say that different colors of people came from different types of clay. So there's something interesting for you there, that Africa was invaded. It was invaded. Everybody didn't come from Africa. What they came from is what you're talking about, the perception of Atlantis, which was all around the Black Sea area, and they knew about the lands around there, and it looked like a circle on their ancient map. They had absolutely no idea about the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean. They thought they were great rivers, and they called them great rivers, like the river Styx and stuff like that in their mythology. But they were afraid to wander into that area because they were told there were monsters in there. So they stuck to the shorelines. So all the tradesmen or whatever that were in their boats going past the Rock of Gibraltar or whatever, or into the Black Sea, they would stay close to the shoreline. So they were very superstitious about going out into the ocean. They weren't going to do that. Apparently they knew that, bad things would happen. So, that was their actual worldview. And so Atlantis is, you're talking about Eurasia. That's Atlantis, this area. Atlantis is the Arata area. It's Hyperborea, it's even north of that.
I see. Uh-huh.
So, in the old ancient folklore, even Herodotus, not Plato. Plato made up a story, analogy or whatever, an allegory. So he made an allegory based on Herodotus is what he said, but he didn't say that. He said that his people, the Athenians, they're very nationalistic, said that his people of the Athenians came from Scythia, Urartu, Ukraine. Yeah, so that's wow. Right. That's exactly right. That was the old world perception of that, even back in 800 BC. So you can imagine how little the people earlier than that knew. They only knew that the typical trade routes around the mountains and such. the Carpathian Mountains and the Caucasus Mountains and all of that. And that, that ancient flood that happened, the Noah flood and all that. Well, that was when the Black Sea, which was not a big sea back then, waters broke through the Mediterranean into the Black Sea, and it flooded through the mountains and created the Caspian Sea. So that, and you can see it on the satellite image.
Thing?
Yeah, you can see it on the satellite. It was
wow.
It was not gradual. It was overnight. This was a big flood, a catastrophe, and you can see it on the satellite images how the water ripped through that mountain region into the Caspian Sea. You can see it clearly. So yeah, that was a very interesting little finding. When I saw that. Those Scythian tattoos are exactly the same artwork as the stone impression of the lion in Göbekli Tepe. So it's a very interesting thing. And they also have like a figure who's looking away. It's actually like a crane or a vulture who represents Cygnus in the stars. And there's a headless man at the bottom of one of the big stone rocks. There's a headless man with Cygnus, and to me it represents like a person who is kind of mindless or whatever, who has no head, has no mind, and he has an erection. So he's basically a little guy who thinks with his wiener, basically. And then you have Cygnus there, and according to you, Sasha, is probably ready to do something to his manhood. Not sure, but it seems to be like a ritualistic sacrifice thing, kind of like the Sabellian people. The priests of Sabel all had to get their wieners cut off, and they became eunuchs. So it's just a weird ancient history thing. That's the way they did things back then, But yeah, but just like today or whatever, some people are even afraid to say that they don't like Trump or something. Well, back then they were afraid to say that they didn't like, these priests. Priests started getting power through fear, So that's how they kind of rolled, They scared people, they bullied people, they massively killed people. There's even in Göbekli Tepe, there's mass graves, of big piles of bones of animals and children and people. It's absolutely nuts, And you can find the same thing in the Crete Islands with the Minoans, and King Minos, But anyway, they have like huge mass graves of children and animals and stuff. So at what point or what happened, where they stopped? Not that I'm very happy they did stop, but what happened, to make them stop with that? Was it more of an awareness of the goddess stuff? Because it seems like,
Are you sure they even? Let's really look at it. I wonder if they really stopped. When you look at the history of El Salvador,
I'm looking at my own history. I don't think they stopped.
They just made it more covert, but they still continue. Wow.
They just decided not to kill the cow and enjoy the milk, or something.
Right.
They just decided to harvest us instead of kill us.
I have a question about this story you have about the dragon and St. George.
Oh, in Cappadocia? Yeah, that's where that story comes from.
Now, do you think a dragon really existed? Because there's dragons all over the world, and I think they existed. But
I think there really was a dragon. Yeah, I do. I think so, and I think it was probably prehistoric. It was probably like a velociraptor, or it was one of those smaller pterodactyls that came flying down. That's what I think it was, like a pterodactyl, because those were still flying around that time. And
so
the Mbudi tribe talks about them.
Yeah, you said that they were giving
they were given it sacrifices because they thought that that they could stop the volcano from exploding, stop the earthquakes, make their crops good. So that was the basic ancient reasons for sacrifice. They thought it helped. They thought it was necessary for the majority to continue on with their lives. That if they sacrificed just the few or the one or whatever, that would appease the gods. They really thought that. I mean, all the way up into the what they call the Vikings, which were the same kind of tribes, from Errata, the Viking people, And they didn't call themselves Vikings. They all have different tribal names, Crutane and all this other stuff. But these people, all the way up until then, before like the pre-Christian stuff in the early 1300s or so, or even earlier, 1000, they were actually volunteering to be a sacrifice for their families and their tribe. Isn't that interesting? And they worshipped a many. Yeah, they worshipped a many-faced god, just like in the Game of Thrones, sort of. Not like that exactly, but they had a many-faced god who had faces north, south, east, and west, and had a plis on the top of its head representing the half eggshell of creation, that they were born here on Earth. And those represent the quadrants of astrology, north, south, east, and west in the sky. And what was interesting about that is they had this, what they call the Orpheus egg, with a snake wrapped around it. And it was a fertility symbol, and this snake energy was what they considered, the universal energy. And they also, considered that energy to be like masculine, like a sperm. And it was weird. They didn't even know what a sperm looked like, or did they? You know what I mean? It was just weird that they used that particular symbol to represent male fertility. The egg, of course, represents the universal female fertility symbol. And it's what they thought at first that they came from. And it could have been, who knows, or whatever. But it was their symbolization of the idea that we were born from this feminine energy in space. Isn't that weird?
It's certainly very much like what happened with the Maya. And even though people would do individual sacrifices of blood and to get the god's attention, it got to be used as the means of a social control. And you get people like Lord Pakal of Palenque, who's mass murderer, and they just basically get rid of their enemies.
Oh yeah. There was the bird, the crane, and all of that in ancient Egypt and in many different cultures. Not just a representation of Cygnus or whatever, but it was in all ancient astrology. And what I found interesting is that they didn't use like gods and goddesses like we do today, like Hercules and Perseus and Andromeda and all of that to name their galaxies. They had spiders and monkeys and birds and you'll see those in the Nazca lines. Those aren't just symbols, arbitrary symbols, but they are a veneration, of those constellations. So these people were very much aware of, they were totems. They were aware of the constellations. And speaking of totems, that is a cool thing, the anamorphism or whatever. That they did venerate those. They wore helmets that looked like birds, and lion people and all of that. They did that, but what's that based on? Are they venerating an actual lion person or a bird person? So it's very interesting with the Thoth thing and all that. And Thoth was not just an Egyptian; he was actually also from the Balkan area as an Illyrian. And so you have those symbols that are actually on the emerald tablets of Thoth. are the old Scythian language symbols that I'm talking about. Those are the same symbols. If you want to know where that comes from, it comes from Arata. That's where that comes from.
Wow.
I'd hang my hat on it, Sasha. Seriously.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting stories is how Inanna was given the Indus Valley as her fief, and she also had her place in Uruk, and she would go back and forth between the two places, and basically she couldn't. They never got along, and Arata was always outsmarting Sumer, is what was happening.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We have a whole
they were
bunch
older.
Of stories like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And then,
the Sumeria was great. It was like the Los Angeles of the world. You had groupings of different cultures from all over the place. The Akkadians, the Persians, everyone. It was there, in Babylon. And Alexander the First, the one that made the Alexandria Library and the library in Babylon.
Oh yeah.
He was witness to this, and his mother was from these Scythian tribes that we're talking about.
That's right. That's right. And his father was actually Marduk.
Yeah. His mother was Illyrian, and his father was Macedonian, King Philip.
Yes.
Of Macedonia.
Yes.
Yeah. So he had a very deep cultural awareness of the Near East. It was interesting.
The story was that Olympias said, Philip ain't your dad. Your dad was Zeus, who was Marduk, who came to me, Alexander. And as soon as Alexander got to Egypt, he went right away down to Siwa, and he talked to the oracle of Zeus. And the priest gets up in this place, little chamber, and he says, "Yes, indeed, you are the son of Zeus." And before that, Alexander, before he cut the Gordian knot and stuff, went to the temple of Aphrodite, and he gets at Delphi, and he gets the seer, the prophetess there, and he holds his sword at her throat and said, "Go into a chat and said, tell me if Zeus is my father." And she says, "Yeah, Zeus is your father."
Right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It happened already. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, they were really big on the Son of God thing, and all through history.
Yeah, that's it.
Whatever, Son of God. Yeah, made you really important. I wanted to make a little comment for people. Yeah, just a little aside. I once was in an experience with some bird people, and this is back in 1989 or 90, and I found myself in a past life when I was going up a pyramid type temple, and I was a tall being, so I could walk up those steps very easy, just like taking a step. And
that sounds Mayan or Aztecian.
Yeah, it was supposed to be back on Nibiru. Anyway, that was the story, but which we don't know. I mean, since they're here, they're probably there too. But on both sides were these very tall bird beings, and I was really puzzled by this thing. This is back in 1989, 90, and I'm going, what, bird people? But then years later, Corey Good said that he worked with bird people, and then I started to find the depictions, of Thoth. And so it could be, Thoth. Well, he's supposed to be the son of Enki, and I don't think Enki made it with a bird.
Erishkigal was his mother, and she's often depicted as one in those demon forms. It's Erishkigal.
Yeah,
she's the younger sister of Inanna.
Inanna and Erishkigal have bird feet, but they have a human torso.
Yeah, they were very aware that birds were a feathered serpent. They were very aware of that back then.
Yeah.
So that just makes you wonder: can you
Quetzalcoatl?
Can you procreate with the serpents and birds and be a humanoid?
We know that the Greys and others that do all kinds of experiments, and you get all kinds of creatures.
We have the genetic experiments, but I wonder if this, because they said that Helena of Troy was raped by who was Alexander? Somebody was raped by a swan. What is that?
That's Zeus. That's usually
Zeus raped too.
Everybody.
Zeus turned into a swan and raped. I guess it was Alexander's mother who was.
No.
Anyway, I'm mixing up my mythology stories, but I'll look that up later.
Was that like Persephone or something like that?
Yes, it was something. I thought it was. Anyway, I'll look it up.
Yeah.
The swan. So we have these stories, and they produce children. So
right. Well, I mean, even in modern day history, I talked to David Adair. You guys probably know him, and he talked about seeing beings that had fox heads. They were humanoid fox head beings, and lion people, and all kinds of different things like that. And he's saying it with a straight on face, like they exist still. They're out there, So who knows what kind of experiments are going on?
Yeah, it was Leda. Leda was raped by Zeus pretending to be a swan. So was he shape-shifting? But you
raised a bigger question about each person's idioverse. How it's real to each of us, and how each of our idioverses are somewhat divergent from each other's.
Yeah, I mean, even who they call the Tuas Danan, that seem to fly in on ghost ships in the sky and all of that. Those are the Dardanian people from this Balkan area. That's King Dardanus. They were Hellenistic, and they invaded Ireland. Okay, but basically, even in in their stories, with the gods and goddesses and all of that. What did they said? They were talking about little shapeshifters and changelings, and that's kind of how their folklore went. But they were the Dardanians, and the Hellenistic was basically the ancient Greek, that's ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm.
From the Mycenaean and
they came across in coracles these boats that was it, and there were little people already there.
Right, exactly. Yeah,
the Celts come, and there's people there already. Little people.
They're there already. Yes, exactly. Just like the Mbudi tribe in Africa. There's the little ones, that were discovered in the mountain rainforests and that. And they're still there. And I'm not going to use the derogatory term for them or the scientific term because, I'm not a Darwinian, and I think they're all racist. I just do.
That's right. That's right. They're full on people. They're full on intelligent people. I've studied all of the pygmy people. They're matter of fact, they have incredible sensitivities that most other people lack.
Well,
they're living fossils. They're ancient. Yeah.
They can empathize with animals and know what they're going to do because they can feel the animal. It's quite amazing what they do.
Yeah, their people are as old as the coelacanth fish, That's amazing. Yeah. But where the Nazca lines are in Peru?
Oh, yes.
Well, there's this incredibly large trench that begins in Russia and Japan, where the ancient ruins have been found on the coast of Japan, and the story of the ancient E.T. encounter with a female being. It's like a female goddess type that came from space or something in a little capsule. And the trench ends dead on across the whole Pacific Ocean, which, as you guys know, because you live there, is enormous. And you actually live right on this ridge, this underwater mountainous ridge that is one of the most Teutonic magnetic places on Earth. And it directly ends dead center at the Nazca lines. Did you know that?
Wow. No, I didn't know it ended that far
I'm the
south.
only one
Wow.
that'll ever tell you that. Yeah, that is a fact, you know. And I just discovered that just looking at it.
Sense. We're at 21 degrees north, and Peru is way. But there's this line, and you can actually see where things happen. For example, the Kuriil Islands and so forth are this whole chain of Hawaiian Islands. We're the tops of mountains of which was once a continent, and this is the birthplace where the Earth keeps getting venting continually. It takes 1 million years to build a platform and 1 million years for an island to arise, and it moves off the hot spot, and it just keeps birthing islands out here.
Yeah, absolutely. There, if you go on Google Earth, you'll see the petroglyphs, giant, huge petroglyphs on the Iraq ley line in between Eridu and the city of Ur. So that's Samaria, right? You know.
Yeah.
And all along this line, you guys can all do this. You know, go to Google Earth and type in Eridu, Iraq, and there's a little spread of clear a line when you zoom in a little bit, and you'll start to see giant petroglyphs of bulls, you know, like bison, and a lady farming, and horses and everything else along this ley line. Isn't that weird?
Oh boy.
Oh boy, that opens up a big can of worms.
Yeah, so so basically the ancients knew about these lines, and they exploited them for energy, for whatever they needed energy for.
Yeah, like back then, you know, when they created this stuff. Yeah, when they created this stuff, there was there was an ancient perception of tribal motherhood, matrilineal stuff. You know, that's what they were focusing on, is nature energy. You know, goddess energy, feminine fertility energy. It was much later, you know, that phalluses and obelisks started everywhere. That's not that they weren't popping up naturally somewhere else, but you know, as far as culturally, that came much later. And like you said, these matrilinear societies were not as hierarchical as the patriarchy. You know, they were to take care of the tribe, basically, and even the male figure in the tribe, or the Dagda or whatever, thought, you know, so much of the woman that she was the main counsel for the tribe. So it was like that in a lot of those tribes in the Balkans. They were very much like that, especially the Hellenistic tribes.
And so that's an alternate model for humanity. That's very important. Riane Eisler has got whole books about what she calls this partnership society.
Oh yeah.
Versus a dominator society.
Yeah, I guess utilitarian.
Vampire society. Yeah, she calls it vampire society. That's versus oxytocin society, I suppose.
Yeah, a utilitarian society where everyone helps out, and it's a socialist democracy, you know.
Yeah, consensus.
I'd throw that in there.
Society. That's what it really comes down to, a consensus society.
Hey, Bret, this is our last minute. We're ending in 1 minute. Tell us a little bit about how people can reach you, website, books.
Oh, okay. Well, anyone can go to Facebook.com or type Bret Colin Sheppard, COLIN SHEPPARD. And they can find me on Facebook, or they can email me at bretcolin66@gmail.com.
And your books are?
Oh, my books are... All righty. No problem.
Alrighty. Thank you so much, Bret. Great show. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Matt Peter.
Yep. Thank you.
Aloha.
All right. Thanks, Sasha.